Welcome back, friends. So, a little bit of historical context in the last opening episode. The political climate, we discussed mid-century revolutions, doctrinal setting, quanta cura, and the audience. That's always something to take note of. In the first place, it is the bishops worldwide, um, aimed at countering specific trends in European thought, most specifically out of the French Revolution.
Right.
I know the Civil War is going on here, but from the global perspective, that looks like a little skirmish of some sort. Really, what was going on in European thought as a result of French Revolution
Well,
is
and
where.
it's very interesting that you point that out, right? Because there is the perfect example of a dichotomy of a just war versus unjust wars that are being fought, right? The American Revolution being a just war, the French Revolution being a terribly unjust war, right? People who don't have a right to power trying to usurp it from those who are legitimately consecrated by God to rule over that country, right? You have a theft that's going on. In America, you have an unjust leader, imposing restrictions on a people who have a right to take part in the body politic, and they're basically being excluded. So you have, this juxtaposition of a just war versus an unjust war. And then the same thing would be true as you were talking about, like our Civil War, right? You have these quote unquote Spanish, Mexican, and other types of revolutions that are going on that once again more follow the line of that French Revolution, right, which is an unjust usurping of power that was legitimately given to govern these people by God, right? These we have to remember, because we are so far separated from this, and even when we think about Americans, you already have that rupture of a truly consecrated king, right? When Henry pulls himself out from the authority of the Catholic Church, he breaks his right to the throne, right? He ruptures that. So consequently, when the American people begin fighting against that, they're not actually fighting against a correctly consecrated king anymore because he has removed himself from that legitimate authority. So for them to reestablish an authority there is, a movement towards a good, right? Away from an evil. But in all of the other cases, you may have a bad king or a bad father per se, but it doesn't mean that you have a right to remove yourself from their quote unquote authority, right? So it's an interesting time, I think, that we're looking at that nuance, and into that, because you have these two contentious, or I guess contenders for what is good and moral, coming at each other, have a you have the ability for these errors to enter in. The siren calls of the modernists and the communards or the communists, as opposed to the truth, right? The true voices of the church and the authentic voices of people seeking authentic liberty and authentic governance.
Very good. Thank you. So Pope Pius IX was born Giovanni Maria Mastei Fer Ferrettiti, um, May 13th, Our Lady of Fatima Day, 1792, 150 years into the future, in Senegale, Italy. It was a noble but modest family. He suffered from epilepsy in his youth and therefore was initially barred from seminary studies. But after persistent prayer and medical improvement, he was admitted to the Pontifical Academy of Noble Ecclesiastics in Rome. He was ordained in 1819. He ministered at the Tata um, Giovanni Institute for Abandoned Children, an experience that shaped his pastoral outlook. As a papal envoy to Chile and Peru from 1823 to 25, he demonstrated unusual pastoral adaptability, adaptability,
Adaptability.
adaptability, yes, thank you, in the young republics. As Bishop of Spoleto and then Imola, he earned renown for reconciling revolutionary factions during the uprisings of 1831. He was elected Pope on June 16, 1846, taking the name Pius IX in honor of Pius VII. He began with moderate reforms and an amnesty for political prisoners. Forced into exile during the revolutions of 1848, he returned to Rome in 1850 under French protection, a providential preservation of the papacy's independence. His pontificate defined the dogma of the Immaculate Conception in 1854. He convened the Vatican Council I, 1869 to 1870, defining papal infallibility, and he issued the Syllabus of Errors with Quanta Cara in 1864. He endured the loss of the Papal States in 1870, yet retained moral authority until his death on February the 7th of 1878, the longest pontificate in history of 32 years. Beatified by Pope John Paul II, so he's blessed. Pius the Ninth's life reflects providential patterns, healing from illness enabling his vocation, a preservation through exile, and Marian devotion anticipating the 20th century Fatima apparitions.
Yeah, it's profound, and also, I mean, with the Immaculate Conception, also the apparitions in Lourdes. I mean,
Sure.
his it really is, when you think about it. I mean, you can't not have a substantial impact when you have a papacy of such long duration. But what a profound, like, I got a profoundly political change going on at that time. And you can see the attempts of the church to respond to really willful children, that you just didn't really see it coming. All of us parents can really understand that, right? Where you just you've raised, your first three kids are really great, and all of a sudden that willful one shows up and you don't quite know what to do with them, right? Well, I mean, and this was a, I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but it was quite a rupture for the papacy to have to deal with. It was up until that point, I think, and really, we can't discount technologies that are going on, that are assisting in the rapid fire spreading of disinformation. It's always been said that Rome moves slowly, but and I love that story, the Greek myth about truth and rumor, right? Rumor convinces truth to go and bathe in the water, and while she's bathing, so that truth can present herself beautifully to the world, and while truth is bathing, rumor dresses in her clothes and rushes off in front of her, right?
Mhm.
The church was really contending with a little bit of that, right? Because she's meticulous, methodical, not wanting to cause any errors, and yet, so evil can often find the church appearing to be on a back foot. It often looks as though the church is playing defense, but not offense. But you can really see, even in his papacy, especially with the declaration of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, how she's not behind, right? She proceeds in all things. It's just that maybe we are too ignorant to understand what the game is that's being played.
Correct. In that John Paul, to some, this may seem like an obscure uh, pope from distant past, and he brings him forward with the
Right,
beatification. Of
right.
course, there has to be the hand of God with miracles and so forth, but I assure you, this document's going to be front and center, and it's a highlighting, right?
Right.
John Paul is in our time
Yeah,
highlighting that this is still a relevant document.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Let's pick up in the next episode with the urgency of the hour. Till then, my friends, Fide Serraccio.